Basketball was invented in 1891. Since the inception of the game, we've watched as equipment, rules, and players have evolved the initial framework of peach tossing. We've marveled at the greatest to play the game, pioneers such as Bill Russell and his 11 championships, and Wilt Chamberlain and his 100-point game and multiple 50-point-per-game seasons. Once-in-a-generation talents such as the two greatest players to ever play the game, Michael Jordan and LeBron James, and international players such as Drazen Petrovic and Hakeem Olajuwon that paved the way for future foreign phenoms like Dirk Nowitzki and Kristaps Porzingis. We've sat in awe as teams like the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers provided the greatest rivalry since Magic and Bird in the 80s, and laughed, either out of pity, mockery, or frustration, as teams such as the Brooklyn Nets and the Sacramento Kings dwell in the cellar year after year, perfecting the art of the tank, solemnly hoping that this will be the year where the prospect they had so highly touted will save them from the depths of the league and revitalize their respective franchises. But what if their wishes were never answered? What if the top prospects in the world were awful at the sport they had grown up watching, loving, and practicing? What if it wasn't only the top talent, but every player in the class, no matter how hard they trained, just couldn't compete with the current talent level of professionals, or even college students? Welcome to the slow, cruel, and unforgiving death of basketball.
NBA continues to grow. It successfully globalized its brand.
Every young boy, increasingly young girl now gets into the NBA aspires to the NFL basketball players. Regardless of where they grow up, the only reason parents don't want their kids to play.
The popularity of the players.
Where they can watch NBA basketball, they can watch college basketball, and of course, the pros now in the Olympics, the World Games, all these things are giving the global stage for people to see basketball at the highest level.
Yet there's this feeling that we both feel, and that most even just casual sports fans feel, that the NBA is closing that gap and becoming the most popular sport in America. Why do we feel that way?
But if we're all being honest and think, what is basketball?
Perfect sport.
Each year beyond the 2017-2018 season, I will be supplying the NBA with a hand-picked class of duds. Each of them are 40 overall, 5'3", 145-pound scrubs with no distinguishing features besides their position, appearance, and personality. Without fail, Draft Express, 2K, and NBA.com will attempt to rank each of the prospects. Inevitably, they will all fail every time. Making each eligible player the exact same causes this game to act strangely, and understandably so. The number one pick in the NBA draft is supposed to be the most valuable asset a team can have, and provide a can't-miss, perhaps even Hall of Fame caliber player. Even if teams think this class is a weak one, why wouldn't it be worth something? During year one, the season progresses as it did in real life. However, for teams such as the Phoenix Suns, who received the number one pick in real life, or the Sacramento Kings, who picked directly after, prizes such as Arizona's DeAndre Ayton or Duke's Marvin Bagley do not wait for them in the offseason as metaphorical lights at the end of the tunnel. Instead, we take a look at our first mock draft to see which prospects will be stuck with unsuspecting suitors during year one of the basketball apocalypse. Alexei Semenko, a small forward from Ukraine, is projected to be the number one pick. He's nearly the unanimous top prospect in season opening mock drafts. Despite this, his scouting report lists no strengths and includes weaknesses such as an absolute liability and bonehead on defense. All of his ratings are Fs, except for his potential, which is unknown. That must explain why teams are so high on him. Other top rookies include Brooke Benjamin, a shooting guard from Washington, Kaya Itzet, a 2-year Turkish Eurostash, and Younglong Cherry, a Chinese power forward responsible for the best moniker in the draft. Another notable prospect is Gus Dillon, a power forward from Seminole State College. I had never heard of this college, but after a quick Google search, I can assume Gus's sole mission is to erase the legacy of the school's most famous alum, George Zimmerman. This may prove to be a tough test, though, as his scouting report lists his rebounding ability as simply a piece of punctuation, and compares his defensive ability to the equivalent of if he was sitting on the bench or had left the arena entirely. I stopped the simulation as 2018 hits to check if the league has imploded yet. Luckily, everything's still running smoothly. The Cavs and Raptors are atop the East, and the Warriors hold a tight grip on the rest of the Western Conference's balls. In the race for Alexei Semenko, the Atlanta Hawks hold a close lead at 8-29, with the Grizzlies and Nets not too far behind. The Nets have nothing to tank for, their picks owned by Cleveland, but the Hawks and Grizzlies are desperately trying to lose. Speaking of which, our mock drafts have been updated. Let's see who will be the Hawks' greatest player since Dominique Wilkins. Shockingly, Draft Express has pre-season unanimous top prospect Alexei Semenko at number 2, behind throne holder Brett Vincent, a power forward out of Kansas. Despite being the best player at one of the most successful and prestigious college basketball programs in the country, Brett's scouting report is glaringly horrific. His ceiling, or the top player he can be if he lives up to his fullest potential, doesn't even get the courtesy of a player comparison. Instead, he's just listed as out of the league. Brett is averaging 1.4 points per game and 1 assist per game, and shooting 24% from the field. His attribute grades are all F, including his potential, yet he's the top prospect in the draft. No front office personnel can explain this. Checking the buzz on social media, Brett apparently outshined fellow top prospect Murray Elliott in the December 30th Big 12 matchup. However, he finished with a stat line of 0 points, 0 rebounds, and 1 assist. So the only stat line Elliott could have finished with is zeros across the board. Chalk it up to good defense, I suppose. As we scroll down Brett's mentions, they are consistently negative, either choosing to highlight doubts from NBA scouts or lackluster stat lines from games that a number 1 prospect should be dominating. In fact, his season high is just 6 points. Sadly, this is one of the highest totals from any prospect. Alexi isn't faring much better either. After 15 games played, perhaps he was benched for a few of them, he averages 1.4 points per game and 1.3 assists per game, slightly better numbers than Brett. He's also shooting more than double Brett's field goal percentage. Social media has been fairly quiet pertaining to Alexi. He was mentioned once in November about his awful game, and then about 2 months later, he's being projected as the number 2 pick. I'm not sure how that adds up. As the season comes to a roundup, things remain normal. Steph Curry wins his 3rd MVP, Ben Simmons wins Rookie of the Year, Jeremy Lin wins Sixth Man. The playoff seedings looks to have held as well, and as we inch closer to our inaugural Doomsday Draft, the Warriors take down the 76ers in the NBA Finals, so our current champion matches the real-life one. But who cares about NBA playoff basketballs? A new mock draft has been released. Kaya Itzit, who averages less than 1 point per game and has an awful ability to run the point or be involved in an offense at all, is now projected 2nd. Pedro Pessoa, a Brazilian small forward, is our first prospect to break the game. Not only is he compared to a stone statue and called a very bad player maker, I'll assume the NBA scout just didn't care enough to fix his typo, but in the 31 games Pedro played this season, he averaged nearly 4 points per game, a hefty sum compared to the rest of our prospects. What caught my attention was the presumed explanation for his high scoring totals. Pedro shot 133% this season, an unprecedented and completely unattainable figure, yet Pedro achieved it, and did so while shooting just 14% from behind the arc. It is baffling to me that a prospect who managed the impossible is not projected number 1. Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick of the draft, point guard Isaac Norris of Texas Tech, somehow has the best numbers of any prospect I've looked at so far. He's also shooting over 100%, yet he might go undrafted. This concerns me. 16 players retire from the league after the first season, including Dirk Nowitzki and Manu Ginobili. They will never know the horrors that are about to unfold upon the NBA. Realizing that this draft class is much weaker than the years previous, the league votes to allow franchises to trade first-round picks in consecutive years. This precautionary measure will only further the atrocities in the upcoming draft. The Hawks are projected the number 1 pick in the draft lottery, but whether by bad luck or perhaps good, depending on how you interpret it, fall to number 2. Mark Tatum, the deputy commissioner, congratulates the Sacramento Kings, who will be picking first. His congratulations means nothing. The draft combine goes spectacularly poorly. Nearly every single prospect runs a 3.7 3/4 sprint, the max time. Even the top time from Brett Vincent, a 3.57, would finish dead last in the 2018 NBA Draft Combine. In lane agility, every prospect besides Brett finished within 0.1 seconds of the maximum time. Brett, the athletic freak that he is, also held the top vertical, at a solid 28 inches. Over half of the top prospects either declined to bench out of fear, or couldn't even manage to bench once. The highest number of repetitions was 3. Finally, the draft has arrived. As fans around the world tune in to see who the next LeBron or Kevin Durant will be, they are about to be severely disappointed. Let's see who the Kings decide to... Oh my god. The Grizzlies have been duped. They have just traded their franchise centerpiece, who at one point was the highest paid player in NBA history, for a man with a 28-inch vertical. And yet, the Grizzlies managed to make this move even more obscene. They select Ed Underwood, a center from Kansas State that I haven't mentioned yet in this video. The reason for that is because Ed Underwood was projected by all 3 mock drafts to go undrafted, and I'd severely underestimated the CPU's ability to make baffling moves when faced with indecision. The Memphis Grizzlies have traded away their star point guard for a player they most likely could have signed after the draft. Twitter user Max Ehrlich seems to be thrilled with the Grizzlies move, however. The same goes for Blue Archer 18, who I guarantee had never heard of Ed Underwood before the Grizzlies picked him. Ed averaged 0.7 points per game and 0.9 assists per game during this college season. Expert analysis, you two. The Kings, realizing how lopsided their deal with the Grizzlies was, feel bad and attempt to even the playing field by trading back into the draft for the number 2 pick. To do so, they give up Buddy Hield and Frank Mason, 2 young talents for the future. In return, they receive the pick and an unmovable contract in Miles Plumlee. The Kings make the smart pick, drafting Brett Vincent, the athletic freak. As I'm sitting in shock over how the first 2 picks of the inaugural Doomsday Draft have played out, I'm suddenly blown out of my fucking chair when the Pistons trade their franchise centerpiece, Andre Drummond, to the 76ers for the number 3 selection and Patrick Peterson. While I took control of the 76ers during the regular season, I only did so because the user must control a team. I made sure to automate every single responsibility. As a result, I'm just dying at the steal that the 76ers managed to pull off. With their newly acquired pick, Detroit drafts what they think to be Andre Drummond's replacement, center Eugene Strawberry out of Virginia. The Cavaliers are the first team not to trade their pick. Unfathomable, perhaps, when you see what each of the first 3 teams hauled in return for their pick. Their draft shooting guard Brooke Benjamin, who somehow gained 23 pounds during the college basketball season. The trading continues as the Grizzlies, who are happy with their first selection, decide that they don't need number 5. They trade the pick to the Denver Nuggets, who give away Paul Millsap and Mason Plumlee. 5 picks in, and both Plumlee brothers have been traded. Some things just never change. The Nuggets select Calbert Livingston, who will have more of an impact than any other rookie in Season 2. The madness continues. The Kings, who are for some reason doubting their selection of number 1 prospect Brett Vincent, inexplicably ship him to Indiana for the number 6 pick and veteran Ish Smith. Vlade Divac's incompetence strikes once again, as Kings fans are left in dismay. With their redo, the Kings choose Theodore Barkley, a power forward from Pepperdine College. With no breaks from the action, the Nets trade reigning 6th Man of the Year Jeremy Lin for the opportunity to see what it feels like to own a lottery pick again. They subsequently squander the pick by selecting Philip Early, a center out of Cincinnati. As every pick progresses, viewers become more and more disheartened. They aren't familiar with any of the selections. They will become even more distraught in the coming years to learn that these prospects, as unskilled as they already are, have already reached their potential. Thus, the inaugural Doomsday Draft comes to a close. Looking at the draft summary, the order of players drafted, while not only negligible seeing as every single one of them is 40 overall, seems nonsensical. Those who were projected to go undrafted, like Ed Underwood and Eugene Strawberry, went in the top 3. Those who were projected to go top 3, like Alexei Semenko or Kaya Itzit, are passed on until the 2nd round, when the 76ers, coincidentally, scooped up both of them. Free agency is relatively unspectacular. The Cavs' combination of signing Brook Lopez and drafting Brooke Benjamin is enough to retain LeBron James. KD stays with the Warriors, but Draymond Green has a torn ACL, and nobody's really sure when it'll heal. In the marquee move of the summer, Paul George signs a 1-year deal with the Knicks. In his first Summer League game, first overall selection Ed Underwood plays 9 minutes and scores 2 points with 3 fouls. Things, unfortunately, will most likely not be getting any brighter for this young man. And with that, Season 1 comes to a close. Sadly, for the NBA, this is only the beginning.